welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today, I'm going to try something a little different. Jumping on the GPT bandwagon here, and I'm going to see what AI has to say about grief and grieving and see just how good this stuff is. I know I'm well aware I'm not the first person to do something like this. I've actually listened to a couple podcasts where folks have interviewed ChatGPT as an interviewee on whatever their topic is. So by no means am I groundbreaking anything here, doing something brand new. But I'm just, I'm curious about what GPT has to say about grief and grieving. So yeah, this will likely be a slightly shorter episode, but I'm super curious what it has to say about different ideas and thoughts on grief. So let's just dive right on in, shall we? So I have it loaded on my phone, and I'm going to have my phone next to the microphone, so hopefully it picks all this up okay. Hi, future Nikki here. Real quick before I ask the first question to ChatGPT, just a heads up, there is a weird sound glitch that happened in the first about 8 to 10 seconds of its response that I could not edit out. It does go away, so stick with it. I apologize if it's a little off-putting. Just fast forward about 15 seconds. What is grief?
Grief is a natural and complex emotional response to loss. It can occur when someone experiences the death of a loved one, but it can also happen in response to other types of loss, such as the end of a relationship, a major life change, or the loss of a job. Grief often involves a range of emotion, and even numbness. It can also be accompanied by physical symptoms, such as fatigue, difficulty sleeping, and changes in appetite. Grief can be a deeply personal and individual experience, and the way people cope with it can vary widely. The process of grieving can take time and may involve several stages, including shock and disbelief, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It's important to allow yourself time to grieve and to seek support from loved ones, friends, or mental health professionals if you're struggling to cope with your feelings of grief.
Okay, so far not so bad. He did specifically suggest seeking professional help if you're having trouble coping with your grief, which is something I always say. I did find it, I keep saying he, go on with it, it was a male voice. So I did notice that a lot of the things it told me were things about the stages of grief that I just talked about in my last episode on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It even says, this may involve several stages, including shock and disbelief, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, which those are the 5 stages of grief, according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So you know what? Let's go on with that trend, shall we? What are your thoughts on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a Swiss-American psychiatrist who is best known for her work on the stages of grief in the process of dying. Her book, On Death and Dying, 1969, introduced the now well-known 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Kubler-Ross's work on grief and dying was groundbreaking for its time and helped to bring attention to the importance of supporting individuals who are facing end-of-life issues. Her work helped to shift the focus from the medical treatment of dying patients to the emotional and psychological needs of patients and their families. While Kubler-Ross's work on grief and dying has been widely influential.
It stopped talking out loud, so let me finish what it said. Some criticisms have been raised about her methodology and the acceptability of her stages of grief to diverse cultures and contexts. For example, some have argued that her model of grief does not account for individual differences in the grieving process and that it may not accurately reflect the experiences of people from non-Western cultures. Overall, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work has had a significant impact on the field of psychology and end-of-life care. Her contributions continue to be influential today. Okay. Sounds like ChatGPT was also a good friend of our dear friend EKR. And I do understand those criticisms. So anyway, all right. I'm grieving. What should I do?
I'm sorry to hear that you're grieving. Grief is a natural. I'm sorry to hear that you're grieving. Grief is a natural response to loss, but it can be a challenging and painful experience. Here are some suggestions on what you can do to cope with your grief. Allow yourself to feel your emotions. It's essential to allow yourself to feel your emotions. including sadness, anger, and even joy. Don't try to suppress or ignore them. Acknowledge your feelings and express them in healthy ways. Take care of yourself. Grieving can be physically and emotionally draining, so it's crucial to take care of yourself. Eat well, get enough sleep, exercise, and engage in activities that you enjoy. Seek support. Grief can be overwhelming, and it's okay to seek support from family, friends, or a professional therapist. Talk to someone who can listen to you and offer comfort and support. Practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself and don't expect too much from yourself during this time. Understand that healing takes time, and it's okay to take it slow. Honor your loved one's memory. Find ways to honor your loved one's memory, such as creating a memorial or doing something they enjoyed. This can help you feel closer to them and bring you some comfort. Remember that everyone's grieving process is different, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve. Give yourself time and be patient with yourself as you navigate through this difficult time.
Wow, okay. So that was pretty spot on with what I would say. So good for you, ChatGPT. Okay, let's try something a little different here. I just received a terminal diagnosis and I'm scared. What should I do?
I'm sorry to hear about your diagnosis. Receiving a terminal diagnosis can be overwhelming and frightening, but there are steps you can take to help manage your emotions and find support during this difficult time. Here are some suggestions. Seek support. It's important to surround yourself with supportive people who can help you through this time. Reach out to family members, friends, or a support group to connect with others who are going through similar experiences. Get informed. It can be helpful to learn more about your diagnosis and the available treatment options, as well as to talk with your healthcare provider about what to expect in the coming weeks and months. Consider palliative care. Palliative care is specialized medical care focused on improving the quality of life for people with serious illnesses. It can help manage symptoms like pain and discomfort and provide emotional support for both you and your loved ones. Take care of yourself. Self-care is important during this time. This might include getting enough rest, eating a balanced diet, and engaging in activities that bring you joy and comfort. Consider therapy. A therapist or counselor can provide a safe and supportive space to explore your emotions and develop coping strategies. Remember that everyone's experience with a terminal illness is different, and it's important to take things one day at a time. Don't hesitate to ask for help when you need it, and focus on doing what you can to make the most of the time you have.
Wow, that was very insightful, ChatGPT. Thank you. I did notice a lot of those answers were almost copy-paste from the I'm grieving, what should I do question I asked it. So good for you. You got it. So now, me being the curious one, I'm going to ask it some questions about episodes I've already done, things that I've answered in other episodes, and just kind of see what his thoughts are. So also, sorry if you keep hearing a helicopter, because it never fails. As soon as I decide to record a podcast, that's when a helicopter circles around for a half an hour. So I had to pause for a little bit there and wait for whatever that was to wrap up. All right, so anyway, how do I tell my children about death and dying?
Telling your children about death and dying can be a difficult and emotional conversation. But it's important to be honest with them and to provide them with age-appropriate information. Here are some suggestions for talking to your children about death and dying. Use clear and honest language. Children need clear and direct language when discussing death and dying. Avoid euphemisms like, gone to sleep, or, passed away, which can be confusing or frightening for children. Use language that is appropriate for their age and developmental level.
It stopped talking again. Okay, hang on. Answer questions. Children may have questions about death and dying, and it is important to answer them as honestly as possible. If you don't know the answer to the question, be honest and let them know that you will find out more information. Provide reassurance. Children may feel scared or anxious about death, so it's important to provide them with reassurance and support. Let them know that it's okay to feel sad or scared, and that you are there to support them. Be patient. Children may need time to process their emotions and may have many questions over time. Be patient with them and let them know that you are there to support them as they navigate this difficult topic. Use age-appropriate resources. There are many resources available for children to help them understand death and dying, including books, videos, and online resources. Choose resources that are appropriate for your child's age and developmental level. Remember that talking to your children about death and dying is a difficult but important conversation. Be honest and supportive. You can help them understand and process this difficult topic. Holy crap, you guys. That... Wow! I have a sheet of paper I carry around a bunch of copies of that I leave out at my death cafes and hand out when necessary on tips on talking to your children about death and dying. And that is pretty much everything that's on that page. Not all of it, but man, that was a good chunk of it. And whoo! That hit the most important things I always say too is about, being honest. You got to be honest with your kids. Don't make crap up and don't use euphemisms because they're not going to fully understand them. Wow. All right. This is kind of blowing me away a little bit here. I'm having way too much fun with this. Okay, just a couple more. What is the difference between grief and mourning?
Grief and mourning are related concepts that are often used interchangeably, but they have slightly different meanings. Grief refers to the emotional and psychological response to loss. It can involve a range of feelings, such as sadness, anger, guilt, and confusion, and can be triggered by many different types of losses, including the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or a major life change.
Sorry, it cut off again. Picking up where it left off, mourning, on the other hand, refers to the external and social expressions of grief. It includes the rituals, customs, and behaviors that people engage in to express and process their grief, such as attending a funeral or a memorial service, wearing black clothing, or creating a memorial for the person who has died. In other words, grief is an internal experience that involves a range of emotions and psychological responses, while mourning is an external expression of grief that involves social and cultural practices and rituals. Both grief and mourning are important parts of the healing process after loss, and they can help individuals come to terms with their emotions and find meaning in their loss. However, the experience of grief and mourning can be different for everyone and can depend on a variety of factors, including cultural and religious beliefs, personal coping styles, and the nature of the loss itself. That was very insightful. Could you tell me what disenfranchised grief is?
Disenfranchised grief is a type of grief that occurs when a person experiences a loss that is not socially recognized or Disenfranchised grief is a type of grief that occurs when a person experiences a loss that is not socially recognized or supported. This type of grief is often not acknowledged or validated by others, which can make it even more challenging to cope with. Examples of disenfranchised grief include the loss of a pet, a miscarriage, the loss of a same-sex partner, or the loss of a relationship that was not publicly acknowledged. In these situations, the person may feel isolated or alone in their grief because they may not receive the same level of support or understanding that someone who has experienced a more socially recognized type of loss would receive.
What kind of grief have you felt?
As an artificial intelligence language model, I do not have emotions and cannot experience grief or any other feeling. However, I am programmed to provide information and support for people who may be experiencing grief or other difficult emotions. If you are experiencing grief or any other emotional difficulties.
Oh, it goes on to say, I am here to offer guidance and support to the best of my abilities. Well, that's a relief. Glad to know that my ChatGPT is not sentient yet. So that was a fun little experiment. I'm glad, I tried that and everything. And it was comforting to see that everything I had asked it were things that typically things I would say or things that a good grief professional would suggest. And I think that is about what I expected, honestly, because there's been a lot of strides recently in working with the grieving and with grief in general to not stigmatize it as much and to appreciate it more and to recognize how many different things are grief and that we're not going to get over it and that we need to learn to walk with our grief. And it's becoming, thankfully, more commonly known, these things about grief. So, and if that's what's being practiced now, that should be what is placed anywhere online and in reading materials where ChatGPT would gain its information from. So that's very good to know. So all that said, gotta throw this out there. If you are grieving or you're hurting, you're welcome to talk to ChatGPT and get some advice from it, because as you saw, it gave great advice. But it's not going to be a replacement for human connection, okay? If that's not your thing, God knows I'm an introvert, and sometimes I don't want to talk to other human beings, but there's something to be said about real human connection, especially when it comes to getting help for your grief. And whether you want to have that connection or not, whether you believe that other person genuinely cares, especially if it's a therapist or somebody you're paying, you might feel inside maybe they don't actually care and they're just taking my money. But I guarantee you, if they went into the field of grief support specifically, they care. I can't imagine doing what I do as a grief coach, or even when I volunteer to the suicide hotline. You can't do something like that if you don't care. So the other person, they care. They may have their thoughts and feelings about you. We all do, but they're a human being and they're there to support you. So don't let the internet or Chat GPT or AI or anything take the place of that, okay? I can't imagine you would, but just have to throw that out there. All right, so that's really all I had. I just kind of wanted to play this week. It's been an incredibly stressful week, and I haven't had a ton of time, to be brutally honest, to put together a full episode. However, I will say I have some people lined up to interview for my podcast that I'm very excited for you all to hear from. So be looking forward to that. It's probably going to be a couple weeks yet before I'll have those recorded and out, but please know that those are coming. And I'm very excited for you to meet a couple of these people. I'm not going to say anything yet, because it hasn't happened yet. But all right, guys, that's about all I have. So guess what? That means it's time for the Death Deck. Yay. All right, I'm going to shuffle up the cards here. And I'm going to pull one at random. Oh, I like this one. Okay. This is a multiple choice. Would you consider going old school and having a funeral in your home? A, nope, there's a reason funeral homes were invented. B, yes, if the service involves an urn. No, if there's a coffin. Or C, totally. Sounds like a warmer, more personal goodbye. I think it's no secret that I go for C. 100%. I love the idea of a home funeral. I love everything about it. I don't care if there's a dead body in my home in a coffin or casket or just sitting on my dining room table. Well, the table I have probably couldn't support that amount of weight. I couldn't sit on it. It would break. And I'm a small person. So, but beside the point, I would have no issue with that whatsoever. In fact, I would embrace that. If that's something my family would want, I would do that. As a doula, that's something I've always wanted to help out with, was to help somebody put together a home funeral. So there you go. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it was a little different, but we've got some other very exciting things coming up. I have a whole new list of great, exciting topics I'm going to start working on this weekend to research and get some scripts written. I'm excited. Thank you so much for tuning in. And always remember, your grief is yours. Your feelings are valid. Grief doesn't always have to suck. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening today. It really helps the algorithm so more people can find me. But if you'd like to find me elsewhere, I'm at nikkithedeathdoula.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at nikkithedeathdoula. Please feel free to reach out to me there. And if you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/nikkithedeathdoula. As always, all the money I receive through my Patreon goes into a fund so that I can provide pro bono work to those who cannot afford my services. And you'll also get access to bonus content and maybe even a shout out here on the podcast. Scripts, editing, sound design, production, literally everything is done by me, myself, just me. Except for the music. The music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find license information at filmmusic.io/standard-license. And as always, a special shout out to my best friend and husband for continuing to support me along the way.